Hello and welcome back to the video classes. This is once again MS Praveen Kumar, Assistant Professor of Political Science, Government Degree College, Hayathnagar. So the topic today that we are going to discuss is about the Union Council of Ministers. And this topic is covered under the fourth semester of BA Political Science second year. Now, to understand about the Union Council of Ministers, again we have to go to the basics. That is, we have to understand about the parliamentary system of government. So why? Because we have adopted this parliamentary system of government, or we have emulated the parliamentary system of government which is adopted in Britain. And coming to here, the parliamentary system, we know there are two very important features of parliamentary form of government. And one is, in parliamentary system of government, the executive is taken from the legislature. The executive is derived from the legislature. So for that reason, the executive will be responsible to the legislature. So for that reason, the parliamentary system of government is also called as the responsible government. And one more very important feature of parliamentary system of government is, here we find there will exist two executives. One will be the nominal executive and another one will be the real executive. So because we emulated the system from Britain, and in Britain, if we observe, who is the nominal executive, or the titular executive is, it is the British monarch. So the British monarch will be the nominal executive, and also he will be the head of the state. But the real executive authority is vested in the hands of the Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister. So in the same manner, coming to India, because we have a parliamentary system of government, here also we find the two executives. One is nominal and another one is real. So the nominal executive, as we know, is the president is the nominal executive authority of India. So the president, we know, he is also considered as the head of the state, or else he is the chief executive authority. So even if we take article number 53, what it says is, the executive power of the union shall be vested in the president. So the president is the chief executive authority. It is because of that reason we call the president as, he is the first citizen of the country. He is the supreme commander of armed forces. So all these attributes we give to the president because he is the chief executive authority of India. But the president is the nominal executive. And the real executive authority, according to the Indian Constitution, it is given to the Union Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister. So first of all, before dwelling into the Union Council of Ministers and what are the powers and functions of the Union Council of Ministers, so first of all, we'll look into the constitutional provisions regarding the status of the President, the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers. So like here, to understand about the constitutional status about these three very important offices, we'll discuss about three important articles in the Indian Constitution. One is article number 53.1. The second one is article number 74.1, and the third one is article 75.1. Article 53, it talks about the position of the President of India, and 74, it talks about the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers, and 75, it talks about the appointment of the Prime Minister and the Union Council of Ministers. So if we take here article number 53, it explains about the position or the status of the President of India in the Indian political system. So article number 53, what it says is, the executive power of the union shall be vested in the president and shall be exercised either directly or through subordinates in accordance with the constitution. So this article, what it is saying is, the executive power of the union shall be vested in the president. And now coming to article number 74. By seeing this particular article, we will get an understanding about where really the real executive authority is vested in India. This topic of Union Council of Ministers and the topic that we have discussed previously, that is the Prime Minister, these are two very important topics in Indian political system. Why? Because it is through these topics we'll try to locate where the power is concentrated in India. What is the nucleus of power in Indian political system? So here article number 74(1), what it says is, there shall be a council of ministers with the Prime Minister at the head to aid and advise the President, who shall in the exercise of his functions act in accordance with such advice. So by this what we look at is there will be a council of ministers. The constitution is providing for a council of ministers to aid and advise the president. So the president, we know, he is the chief executive authority of India, but still the president will discharge his powers or his duties only on the advice of the Union Council of Ministers. By this, what we understand is the real executive authority of India is given, or else it is vested in the hands of the Union Council of Ministers. And regarding this, we'll discuss in detail, that is whether the advice which is given by the Union Council of Ministers, whether it is binding upon the president or not, we'll discuss in this particular session. And now coming to another very important article in the Indian Constitution, that article number 75. What article number 75(1) says is, the Prime Minister shall be appointed by the President and other ministers shall be appointed by the President on the advice of the Prime Minister. So this particular article, it is explaining about the appointment of the procedure of appointment of the Prime Minister and the Union Council of Ministers. So the Prime Minister is directly appointed by the President. Like after elections are conducted in Lok Sabha, and in Lok Sabha, whichever political party gets the majority, or else whichever pre-poll alliance gets the majority, or else nowadays we are talking about the post-poll alliance, like the coalitions. So whichever coalitions has got the majority, the leader of that particular political party, coalition or alliance, he will be invited by the president to form the government, or else he will be invited by the president to be appointed as the Prime Minister. And now coming to the Union Council of Ministers, the Union Council of Ministers are also appointed by the president, but they are appointed by the president only on the advice of the Prime Minister. So here we locate the power of Indian political system. In Indian political system, we find the power is concentrated in the hands of the Prime Minister. Why? Because without Prime Minister, there are no Council of Ministers. The Council of Ministers are created by the Prime Minister. Of course, the Council of Ministers are appointed by the President, but the Council of Ministers, they are selected, they are nominated by the Prime Minister, and the portfolios or the ministries are distributed among the Council of Ministers by the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister can reshuffle the portfolios, or ultimately the Prime Minister can ask any of the minister to resign from his ministry. So in this, and now here in detail we'll discuss about the appointment of the Council of Ministers, the eligibility to be appointed as the Council of Ministers. Then we'll also discuss about in what way the Council of Ministers are classified in India or categorized in India. And also we'll discuss about the one very important principle of parliamentary system of government, that is the individual responsibility and the collective responsibility. And ultimately, finally, we'll discuss about what are the functions that are performed by the Union Council of Ministers. Now, to discuss about the first point, that is the appointment and also the eligibility of the Union Council of Ministers. So again, we have to go back to the Indian Constitution, that is Article number 74. So Article number 74, here what it says is, there shall be the Council of Ministers with the Prime Minister at the head to aid and advise the President. So we know the President is the head of the state. President is the chief executive authority of India. So the President, in discharging his duties or his powers, he has to function on the basis of the aid and advice which is given by the Union Council of Ministers, who are headed by the Prime Minister. Now, there is a small confusion over here, that is, whether the advice which is given by the Union Council of Ministers, whether this is binding upon the President or not. So the Constitution doesn't clearly say that the advice given to the President has to, it is a mandatory upon the President to follow the advice given by the Council of Ministers. So for that reason, later what has happened was, to grapple with this confusion and also perplexity, the then government, Srimati Indira Gandhi's government, in the year 1976, they came out with an amendment which is the 42nd Amendment of the Indian Constitution. According to this particular amendment, what they have done is, they have made the aid and advice of the Union Council of Ministers binding upon the President of India. So after this amendment, the 42nd Amendment in the year 1976, now the 74th Constitutional Amendment goes like this. There shall be the Council of Ministers with the Prime Minister at the head to aid and advise the President, who shall, in the exercise of his functions, act in accordance with such advice. So with this amendment, what has happened is, the advice which is given by the Council of Ministers, now it is binding upon the President to follow. And later, in 1977, when emergency has come to an end and Janata Party has come to power. So what the Janata Party has thought is, they wanted to bring again some change in the 42nd Amendment Act. Whatever the amendments that were made according to the 42nd Amendment in the Indian Constitution, so they want to rectify some of the amendments. With that intention, the Janata government has come out with one more amendment, and that is the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act in the year 1978. So according to this particular amendment, what is the new provision that is added into the Indian Constitution is, now when the Council of Ministers, they advise the President, for the first instance what the President can do is, the President can ask the Union Council of Ministers to reconsider their advice. That is, if the President is not satisfied with the advice, he can ask the Council of Ministers to reconsider that advice. But if the Council of Ministers, they reconsider or they do not reconsider, and if they send the same advice back to the President, the second time the President definitely has to accept the advice which is given by the Union Council of Ministers. So according to this 44th Amendment Act, of course, this word, that is binding, is not removed from the Indian Constitution. So the advice which is given by the Council of Ministers is binding upon the President. So this statement is continuing, but the President, if he is not satisfied with the advice, he can ask the Union Council of Ministers to consider their advice once. And one more very important thing regarding the advice of the Union Council of Ministers is, the advice which is tendered by the Union Council of Ministers shall not be inquired in any court of law. So the advice, against the advice which is given by the Council of Ministers, that cannot be questioned in any court of law. Now coming to the eligibility to be appointed as the Council of Ministers, the only eligibility that is required, that is specified by the Indian Constitution, is a person should be the member of either Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. Then he can be appointed as a council of minister. But sometimes what happens is, a person, even without being the member of either Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, that is without having the membership in Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, can be directly appointed by the president as the council of minister on the advice of the prime minister. This here we can see in case of Dr. Manmohan Singh Ji. When he was appointed as the finance minister of India, he was neither the member of Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. So he was directly appointed as the finance minister of India. So in such case, what happens is, the constitution, what it says is, so they have to get the membership either in Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha within 6 months. That is, they should get elected either to Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha within 6 months. So this is the eligibility which is required to get elected as a council of minister. And now coming to the types of the council of ministers, or else the classification of the council of ministers. The constitution doesn't divide or else classify the council of ministers. But right from the days of Jawaharlal Nehru, the council of ministers, for the sake of convenience or else for the sake of the smooth functioning of the government and for the sake of the quick decision making, they are divided into 3 or 4 categories. So here among the council of ministers, we can find there will be different kinds of ministers, like the cabinet ministers, and the second one is the ministers of state with independent charge, and the third one is the ministers of state, and the fourth one is coming to the cabinet ministers. So cabinet ministers are those who will head or else who are the heads of the very important ministries, like the Ministry of Finance or Ministry of Defense or Ministry of Home or Ministry of Railways or Ministry of External Affairs. So like that, those departments or those ministries which are very important, the heads of those ministries, they will be called as the cabinet ministers. So here the prime minister, whom will he appoint as the cabinet ministers is those ministers who have vast political experience, and those who are the very senior ministers, and more important is those ministers who are very closely associated with the prime minister and on whom the prime minister will have the confidence. So such kind of ministers will be appointed as the council of such kind of ministers will be appointed as the cabinet ministers. So here if we take a few of the examples, why? Because we need this reference once again when we discuss about the ministers of state. So here if we take a few examples of the cabinet ministers presently, like the Minister of Defense Sri Rajnath Singh, and the Minister of Home Affairs Sri Amit Singh Ji, and Minister of Finance Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman, and the Minister for Road, Transport and Highways Mr. Nitin Gadkari. So like this, all those ministers who are seniors and who have vast political experience, so they will be appointed as the cabinet ministers, and they will be the heads of the very important ministries in the government. So now, though the cabinet is a very powerful institution in the Indian political system right now, the cabinet is a non-constitutional body. That is, the constitution nowhere it mentions about the cabinet. So though the cabinet is a non-constitutional body, but still we find in Indian political system the cabinet it plays a very important role. Why? Because the cabinet is considered as the nucleus of political power in India. That is, among all the council of ministers, so who are very powerful is the cabinet ministers, and they will be very closely associated with the prime minister. So we referred just now that the word cabinet is nowhere used in the Indian constitution, but later when there was an amendment made to Article 352 that deals about national emergency, and that amendment is the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1978. So during that time, the first time the word cabinet is used in the Indian Constitution. So where the word cabinet is used is, according to this amendment, if the president has to impose the national emergency, he has to get a written advice from the cabinet. So during this reference, the word cabinet is used in the Indian Constitution. Now coming to the second category of ministers, that is the ministers of state with independent charge. So these ministers are also like the cabinet ministers, like they perform the same functions and exercise the same powers like the cabinet ministers because they are the heads of certain ministries and departments as cabinet ministers do. But the only difference between the cabinet ministers and the ministers of state with independent charge is the ministers of state with independent charge, they are not the cabinet ministers. Second thing is, they are the heads of those departments which are a little bit, or else they are lesser significant than the ministries which are headed by the cabinet ministers. So this is the only difference between the cabinet minister and the ministers of state with independent charge. So presently, if we have to take the examples for ministers of state, here we can take the Minister of State with independent charge of labor and employment. Presently, Sri Santosh Gangwar, and also the Minister of State of Statistics and Program Implementation, Sri Raj Inderjit Singh. Like that, we can take any number of examples for the ministers of state with independent charge. Now the next category of ministers is the ministers of state. Now there is a difference between ministers of state, independent charge, and the ministers of state. Now coming to the ministers of state with independent charge, they are the heads, or else they are in charge of a particular or independent ministry. But coming to the ministers of state, they are not the heads of any of the ministries. They are not the in charge of any of the ministries, but under a cabinet ministry or else an important ministry, if there are any departments, under a ministry there could be any number of departments. So for those departments, whoever are the heads or whoever are the in charges, they will be called as the ministers of state. Like for instance, if we take under the cabinet ministry, that is the Ministry for Home Affairs, under that if there are any departments, then there will be the Minister of State for Home Affairs. Like if we take like under the cabinet ministry, the Ministry of Finance, under that Ministry of Finance, if there is a department, and that department will be headed by the Minister of State. Like if we have to take couple of examples, like for instance, under the cabinet ministry, the Ministry of Home Affairs, so the cabinet minister is Sri Amit Shah. But under this cabinet ministry of Home Affairs, if there is a department, for that department who will be heading is, it is the Minister of State. So like that, presently the Minister of State for Home Affairs is G. Kishan Reddy. So Sri Amit Shah is the cabinet minister for the Ministry of Home Affairs, but under the Ministry of Home Affairs, for a particular department, it is G. Kishan Reddy who is the Minister of State. In the same manner, if we take another ministry like the Ministry of Roads and Transport and Highways, the cabinet minister is Mr. Nitin Gadkari. But under this ministry, for a department, we have a Minister of State, and that is Mr. V.K. Singh. So like that, the Minister of State, they are not the heads of any of the independent ministries, but they are the heads of the departments under a ministry. And now coming to the next category of ministers, they are the deputy ministers. So in this categorization of the Council of Ministers, if the cabinet ministers, they are like the nucleus and they are at the center around the Prime Minister. At the periphery, here we find the deputy ministers. Now coming to the deputy ministers, who are the deputy ministers are? Now they are not the heads of any of the ministries, or they are not the heads of any of the departments, but the deputy ministers, they are there to assist the cabinet ministers, or else to assist the ministers of state with independent charge in regard to administration or administrative or political or parliamentary duties. So this is the main function of the deputy ministers. And besides these cabinet ministers, ministers of state with independent charge, and ministers of state and the deputy ministers, another very important categorization here that we have to see is the kitchen cabinet. Now what is a kitchen cabinet is, besides this cabinet ministers, now there will be few ministers who will be very, very closely associated with the Prime Minister. So it could be among the cabinet ministers, or else the Prime Minister sometimes he can be depending upon, or he can be taking the advice from someone who is outside the cabinet. So such kind of ministers or such kind of people, so on whom the Prime Minister has the confidence, and for all the important matters, the Prime Minister depends for the sake of the opinion, or else for all the important matters the Prime Minister consults them. So such group of people will be called as the kitchen cabinet. So this we have been finding from the days of Srimati Indira Gandhi, where in decision making the kitchen cabinet is given a lot of importance. Now here, after discussing about the different types of the Council of Ministers, so here we are going to discuss about what are the important principles on which the functioning of the Council of Ministers is based. Now because we have the parliamentary system of government in India, and we know the basic feature of parliamentary form of government is it is a responsible government. Here we find the executive is responsible to the legislature. So what kind of responsibility we find in parliamentary system among the Council of Ministers is, it is the individual responsibility, and the second one is the collective responsibility. So here we find in India, the Council of Ministers, they are individually responsible to the President. So here article number 75, it says that the Council of Ministers are individually responsible to the President. That is, the Council of Ministers will continue in power as long as he has the confidence of the President. And at the same time, each minister is also responsible to the Prime Minister. Why to Prime Minister is because though the Council of Ministers are appointed by the President, the Council of Ministers are selected by the Prime Minister. And the Council of Ministers are distributed or allotted the portfolios by the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister is the leader for the Council of Ministers. So for that reason, the Council of Ministers are individually responsible also to the Prime Minister. And then the same article, article number 75.3, it talks about collective responsibility. So where it states that the Council of Ministers shall be collectively responsible to Lok Sabha. So the Lok Sabha, because we have a parliamentary system of government in India, there are different mechanisms by which the parliament will have a control over the executive. So like for instance, when a no confidence motion is passed by the Lok Sabha, so then what happens is the government will be losing its power and the government has to resign. So in this manner, in India, the Council of Ministers, they are responsible to Lok Sabha. That is, they will continue in power as long as they have the support of the majority members of Lok Sabha. Now coming to Rajya Sabha, Rajya Sabha also has a control over the Council of Ministers. It could be by different apparatus, like by asking the questions or supplementary questions or through debates or something like that. But if a no confidence motion is passed by Rajya Sabha, or no confidence motion is passed in Rajya Sabha and it is not passed in Lok Sabha, then that does not have any effect upon the government. So a no confidence motion has to be passed in Lok Sabha. So by this, what we understand is the Council of Ministers are collectively responsible to the Lok Sabha. And one more thing is, in parliamentary system of government, as we discussed earlier, all the Council of Ministers, they will be working as one single team. So because they work as one single team, for that reason, even if the mistake is done by one single minister, for that mistake, all the Council of Ministers, they have to take the responsibility. So this is called as the collective responsibility. If a no confidence motion is passed on Prime Minister, or if a no confidence motion is passed on one single minister, then what happens is, if that no confidence motion is accepted, then the whole of the Council of Ministers will be losing their power. Why? Because the Council of Ministers, they work as one team. That's the reason why in parliamentary system of government, it is said that the Council of Ministers either will sail together or else they will be sinking together, or else they sink together. So this is called as the collective responsibility of the Council of Ministers. So in this manner, in India, there are two kinds of responsibilities that have to be discharged by the Council of Ministers. One is the individual responsibility and the second one is the collective responsibility. For the collective responsibility, we can take the best example of the Indian cricket team. The team, it stands on one opinion, then it plays as a team, and whatever could be the result, the team will take the collective responsibility. Now, how this happens is, like for instance, the Indian cricket team has to play a match tomorrow. Today, the team meeting will be conducted, and there will be many things that they have to finalize. But the very important thing that they need to finalize is, if India wins the toss, whether we have to go for batting or whether we have to go for fielding. Now, within the team meeting, each member could be having different opinions. So whatever may be their opinions, the contrary opinions, they have to be discussed only within the team meeting. And once the decision is taken and the team comes out of the meeting, then what happens is, all the members, they have to stand on that particular decision. And the next day, team goes to play, and whether the team could win or the team could lose, what happens is, all the team members, they have to be collectively responsible. So if India wins, then the credit goes to the whole team, and if the country loses, what happens is, for that also the whole team should take the responsibility. So whatever the discussions that have taken place in the meeting, those discussions should not be revealed outside in front of the press. So it's all the team members, they have to take the collective responsibility for winning or losing in the match. So in this same manner, the Council of Ministers will be functioning. So they have different contradictory opinions regarding any policy matter. Whatever the opinions they have, that has to be discussed within the four walls of the Council of Ministers. And once the decision is taken and they come out of the meeting, then all the ministers, they have to stand on that particular decision, and that decision could be right or that decision could be wrong. All the ministers have to be collectively responsible for that decision. So this is called as the collective responsibility. Now finally, coming to the powers and functions of the Council of Ministers. So because the Council of Ministers are the real executive of India, so for that reason, the Council of Ministers, they will be enjoying certain real powers in Indian political system. Coming to the very important power of the Council of Ministers is to aid and advise the President. So the main duty or the main responsibility of the Council of Ministers, this is according to article number 75. What it says is, there shall be the Council of Ministers to aid and advise the President. So this is the very important duty of the Council of Ministers. And the second one is the very important responsibilities which are discharged by the Council of Ministers is, it is the Council of Ministers who formulate the internal and external policies of the country. So whatever the policies which are implemented within the country, like it could be the policies which are related to reservations or related to divorce, or it could be related to environment, or it could relate to something like demonetization or the imposition of lockdown or something like that. So all the internal policies are made or formulated by the Council of Ministers, and even the external policies. In what way India has to maintain its relationships with foreign countries. What should be the foreign policy of India? So this also will be formulated by the Council of Ministers. And one more very important function of Council of Ministers is all major decisions regarding defense and security of the country. That is, the external security of the country, protection of the country from the external threats, and also within the country, the maintenance of law and order. This also is the responsibility of the Council of Ministers. And one more thing is, when the Parliament is not in session, we know it is the President who can pass the ordinance. So to pass an ordinance, the President has to be advised by the Council of Ministers. So it is the Cabinet which is responsible for the ordinance by the President when the Parliament is not in session. And one more thing that we are finding in the modern days is, because we know that all the modern states are the welfare states. So before 18th century, the states used to be called as the police states, but after the democratic era has started, all the modern states have become the welfare states. So what is a welfare state? It is a state that aims at the welfare of the people and provides all the facilities to the people. That is, right from birth to grave, the people, the individuals, they depend upon the state. So because we are living in a welfare state, so it is the responsibility of the Council of Ministers to provide the better living conditions to the people. And the next is regarding the control over the national finance. That also is the responsibility of the Council of Ministers. So it is the responsibility particularly of the Finance Minister regarding the financial administration. It could be the preparation of the budget and seeing that the budget is approved within the Parliament, and the spending, the amount of the approved budget. All this financial management will be done by the Finance Minister. And the next is, it is the Cabinet that prepares the text of the President's address to the Parliament. So we know after the elections, the first session of the Parliament, or else the first session of the Parliament in the new year will start with the address of the President. And the text of the President's address will be prepared by the Council of Ministers. And one more thing, the power that the President enjoys is, the President can summon and prorogue the meetings of the Parliament. But on whose advice the President will summon and prorogue the meetings of the Parliament is, it is on the advice of the Council of Ministers. At the same time, the President also has the power to dissolve the lower house of the Parliament, and that is the Lok Sabha. Even that will be done by the President on the advice of the Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister. And also the agenda of the sessions of the Parliament. So what are the topics that comes under the agenda of the Parliament? Also, it is also prepared by the Cabinet. So these are briefly the powers and functions which are performed by the Council of Ministers and Council of Ministers in general and the Cabinet in specific. Well students, here today in this session we discussed about the Union Council of Ministers. And now to conclude about the Union Council of Ministers, what we can say is, because we have adopted a parliamentary system of government, so here we find the real executive authority is vested in the hands of the Union Council of Ministers. So in the Indian political system, we know in any democratic system, all the organs of government are very important. It could be the legislature, executive, or the judiciary. But in the modern times, where we are finding a trend wherein the importance of the legislature is coming down and the importance of executive is going. The importance of executive is going up. So why the importance of executive is going up? For this, we can give many number of reasons. But coming to Indian political system, we know the executive, it consists of the President, Vice President, Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers. But among them, the real executive authority lies in the hands of Council of Ministers, headed by the Prime Minister, and it is this team that runs the real administration of the country. So for that reason, the Union Council of Ministers is the very important topic in Indian political system. So here we come to the end of this session, and in the next session we are going to discuss about the next topic, that is the next organ of government, and that is the Parliament. Till then, have a nice time.